We're going to jump right into it. 2 Kings chapter 14. 2 Kings chapter 14. And we're going to go through probably the whole chapter, so you don't have to stand up. I'm not going to do any kind of pre-reading like we do sometimes, but getting back into things here, we're going to go and introduce a new king. And I kind of changed the title from what's in the bulletin, but you can see from the bulletin who the king is. But I changed the title because last lesson, I think the message was another good, bad king. I don't know if you remember that title or not. Another good, bad king. So the king was bad, but he did a couple good things that, the Bible gives him credit for. Well, that made me think about the title for this one. Originally, I wasn't thinking that, but as I'm studying it and getting ready, I thought, man, a good title for this message would be Another Bad Good King. Okay, because it's exactly the opposite. Amaziah, we're going to talk about him. It's going to say he's a good king, and we're going to read it and say, man, it's really hard to find out that much good that he did, but he did a lot of really bad stuff. And so it's kind of an interesting thing that we see here with many of the kings, actually. God's mercy and calling them good because he knew their heart and they must have made some right decisions and had a desire to follow him. But man, they sure messed up and did some wicked things. Like you go back to Solomon and see the end of his reign being that way. So we're in 2 Kings 14, but we see the character introduced in chapter 12. So hold your place in 2 Kings 14 and then turn back to 12, verse 21. Amen, Samuel. 2 Kings 12, verse 21, it says, For Josachar, the son of Shimeath, and Am I in the right place? What am I doing? 2 Kings, oh yeah, that's right, okay. And Jehazadad, his son of Shomer, his servant, smote him, and he died, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah, his son, reigned in his stead. So we've got this new king introduced. It is Amaziah, and he's on the south side, so that's Judah. And he is the son of Joash. Now I've got Jehoash right there, and I'm going to explain that again here in a minute. All right, so we introduced Amaziah on the side of Judah. Keep going back and forth, and that's why we skip all those sections. So he's not mentioned again until chapter 14. Let's start reading. In the second year of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. So we're talking about this guy. During his reign, Amaziah is going to reign. Okay, that's the formula that we keep using. And he was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehoadan of Jerusalem. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did according to all things as Joash his father did. Howbeit the high places were not taken away, as yet the people did sacrifice and burnt incense on the high places. And so we're going to learn, just go through this whole message. It's just going to be the different things that Amaziah is going to do in his life as a king. And the first thing we see, it says he's a good king, but then it says that he didn't, one thing he didn't do is he didn't take down the high places. Now this is something, I'm going to have to preach a separate message one day on that because I need to, first of all, do a lot more studying myself. But we see this king after king after king, even the good kings that say, only thing they didn't do, I think even Asa, it said this about Asa, he did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. And we could read all these great things he did. It says, but he didn't remove the high places. And I'm going to have to preach that on another day because I can't really get too much into it now with, coming from where I'm coming. But I think that it'll be an interesting study. Like, what was it about this high place that they were allowing sacrifices to be there? I probably should know, but I'm going to just save that for another message. But we see that overall, just like other good kings that didn't do that, I mean, I'm talking about some of your favorite kings, but they didn't remove the high places, the worship in the high places. And so otherwise, it sounds like what we're about to read is about a guy who's a really good king. When it said it about Asa or when it said it about Jehu, I mean, they were good kings, and then they did, of course, Jehu ended up bad too, but they did that which is right in the eyes of the Lord, and they restored the kingdom, and they threw down all the idols, and they did all this stuff. Doesn't seem to be the case with Amaziah, as we're going to see. Okay, so the first thing he did, it says he didn't take away the high places, which we'll have to talk about on another day. Second thing he does is he executes those who conspired against his father Joash or Jehoash. And if you remember, the end of Joash's life ends up being pretty bad because, he gets older and Jehoiada, the priest, dies. And so then he kind of joins up with some bad guys. And then he even has Zacharias killed. And so anyway, some guys recognize he didn't do good. He was a bad king, and they conspire together. They did wrong, but at the same time, they were standing up trying to get rid of a bad king. And so they did conspire together, and they killed Joash. So as soon as Amaziah gets in the kingdom, he's going to do what any other of these kings would probably do. He's going to go ahead and make sure that those servants that killed his father are going to be put to death. Okay, so that's how he kind of starts his reign. Now, nothing about the Bible says that this is wrong. In fact, that's just natural for a king to do. If you remember David, a man after God's own heart, right? He told Solomon, as soon as you get in your kingdom, hey, there's certain people that you need to wipe out. That's just how the kings did, because these guys were conspiring together to kill them, and in order to save, the kingdom, he had to do that. Okay, so he conspired. He executed those who conspired against his father. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with the message, but I want to take a second to explain this because my wife and I talked about this after the last message. And I said, originally I had Joash under here. That's what all the other charts said. And to their credit, that's what almost every verse talking about the Joash of Judah calls him Joash. But there's one verse that calls him Jehoash, and that's in this chapter. And so I just want to reiterate why I changed that. I did the same thing with Jehoram. Sometimes he's called Joram. And so you see, I put both of them as Jehoram. I didn't want to do one and the other. Because for me, I need to know that they both have the same name. Because sometimes in the Bible, it's going to use both of their names. Well, this helps me remember that Jehoram is just kind of like the proper name. Joram is an abbreviation, so it's like a nickname. I mean, that's the way I think about it in my head. Same with Jehoash. Joash is an abbreviated form of Jehoash. And so I just put both of their long names, and the Bible does call him Joash a lot. Okay, but just to prove my point, not that I have to do that, but look at verse 13, and then we'll get back to the lesson. So verse 13 says, this is where it's so hard to study that. I mean, it's pretty difficult to keep up with who these kings are. But it says, and Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat upon his throne. No, that's not right. What am I looking for? Chapter 14, verse 13. And Jehoash, king of Israel, all right, so we got Israel, the north side, Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, and that's the guy that we're introducing today. And then it says, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah. Son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah. So everywhere else it's Joash, but here it's Jehoash. Probably doesn't mean anything to you. You probably don't care, but I just want to explain to you why I'm doing that. It's their full name, you know what I mean? And so I'm just keeping it together in my head. I'm sure you'll pass the test whenever I give this at the end of the lesson. But anyway, I don't know if I would. I'm gonna try to keep these all in my head. Okay, so here's what I think about this. In our society today, you could ask most people, like, name 5 of the kings of the northern kingdom. And, How many people do you think in our world today would be able to answer that? Hardly any of them. But you say, name 5 people on the Kansas City Chiefs. Man, they're going to spout out their names, their number, what position they're in, where they live. I mean, a lot of you guys might not, but in the average person in Kansas City, you ask them, they're going to know those things. And so I think it's a big problem. We need to be raising our kids to say, hey, who are the 12 tribes of Israel? Who are the 12 apostles? Who are the names? What are the names of the kings? Teach them those kinds of things. These are facts that when they're reading their Bible, it's going to help them understand it, and they're going to be wiser and smarter. And I'm not against entertainment necessarily. I don't care if anyone watches football, but or baseball or whatever. But I'm just saying, like it's so, in our society, people just memorize facts and they memorize all these things. And I was actually smitten in my heart about that one day when I realized, here I'm the pastor, and I didn't know a lot of some basic names of people, or I couldn't have even listed the 12. I could have got pretty close, but I couldn't mention the 12 tribes of Israel. There's a couple that I probably would have left out. And I said, man, I need to know these things. And so I think it's a good idea to just every once in a while sit down and try to make sure you have this kind of like, we used to play these games like Bible trivia games. You ever played anything like that? It's helpful. I'm saying it's good to challenge your mind every once in a while. There's a lot of little games we do, trivia type games or whatever, to kind of help our learning and our understanding. But we need some Bible. Every time I say that, Brother Collins used to always say, there's nothing trivial about the Bible, jokingly. But you know what I mean, trivia, to help us learn these things. Because this is important, even though it might be rather boring. I understand that. But it is important, something that we should take the time to do. So that's why I'm doing all this, okay? So talking about Amaziah, Amaziah doesn't take away the high places. And it says that he executes those who conspired against him. Now let's see the first thing that is mentioned about him that is actually a good thing. So let's read verse 5 and 6 again. Chapter 14, verse 5 and 6. And it came to pass as soon as the kingdom was confirmed in his hand, that he slew his servants which had slain the king his father. Now look at this part. But the children of the murderers he slew not, according unto that which is written in the book of the law of Moses, wherein the Lord commanded, saying, the fathers shall not be put to death for the children, nor the children be put to death for the fathers, but every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Okay, so this is one thing you say, hey, he killed these guys that murdered his father, but he didn't go like some of these kings did and say, like, that's it, I'm going to wipe out everybody in your line. Because it wasn't their fault. They didn't conspire against him. It was their fathers, or whatever. So he did what the Bible told him to do. And it seems like, as you read that he did it because he knew the Bible said to do that. And so you see, okay, he does have a good heart. He does apparently seem to want to know what God has to say about it. But I'm going to tell you this, that's pretty much the only good thing you're going to find out about Amaziah. The one time you see something good, because everything else is going to be pretty negative. Okay, so let's keep going. Number 3, now the next 2 points we're going to have to look at 2 Chronicles because they're not in the King's account. So verse 7, for instance, says, he slew of Edom in the valley of Salt 10,000 and took Selah by war. Man, I need to slow down here. And called the name of it Joktheel unto this day. And that's all it says about this war. Okay, but now if you go to 2 Chronicles, so hold your place or mark it, whatever, and then go forward to 2 Chronicles 25, we're going to get a little bit more of a storyline of what happens here. And we're going to see, and as far as I know, this is the first time that we see any kings employing what we call mercenaries. Okay, so familiar with what mercenary, basically it's like an army for hire. You pay this army to come fight your war. They don't have, they don't care one way or the other who wins. They just go where the highest bidder is. And so whoever offers them the money, they'll be, soldiers for that side. And so he gets this mercenary team, we're talking about Amaziah on the south side, and he gets an army together for hire that's from Israel. They don't care. Hey, who do you want us to kill? They're literally just murderers for hire, and they're called mercenaries. So Here's what it says, chapter 25, 2 Chronicles chapter 25, verse 6. He hired also 100,000 mighty men of valor out of Israel for 100 talents of silver. But there came a man of God. Now, we don't know who this prophet was or this man of God, but came a man of God to him, saying, O king, let not the army of Israel go with thee, for the Lord is not with Israel, to wit, with all the children of Ephraim. But if thou wilt go, do it, be strong for the battle. God shall make thee fall before the enemy, for God hath power to help and to cast down. And Amaziah said to the man of God, But what shall we do for the 100 talents which I have given to the army of Israel? And the man of God answered, The Lord is able to give thee much more than this. And Amaziah separated them, to wit, the army that was come to him out of Ephraim, to go home again. Wherefore their anger was greatly kindled against Judah, and they returned home in anger. Okay, so this part of the story wasn't in Kings, but what happens is Amaziah hires an army for hire from Israel, from the tribe of Ephraim, and he's going to use them to go into the battle here. And this man of God comes and says, look, God's not with the northern kingdom. He's not with Israel. Like, don't team up with these guys and don't employ these mercenaries. If you want to go up and take the city, that's fine, but don't employ Israel here. And so what we see is that he ends up taking the city, and he does prevail. Okay, so let's see here, verse 14. The Edomites is the ones I keep wanting to say. Now it came to pass after Amaziah was come from the slaughter of the Edomites, that he brought, so here's the next thing we're going to see. Again, this isn't in Kings, but this is in Chronicles. That he brought the gods of the children of Seir and set them up to be his gods, and bowed down himself before them and burned incense unto them. This doesn't sound like a good king to me. Now, I will say, again, the man of God came to him and said, God said, don't use these Israelites. And he's like, well, what about the 100 talents I just paid him? He said, God can give you more than that. Just let these guys go and don't get involved. And so the guy listens to him. Right? But then after he wins the battle and kills the Edomites, he comes back with their idols and he begins worshiping them. Like, what in the world are you thinking? And so obviously this makes God mad. And so look what happens next. As soon as I find it. Anybody remember where I left off? Okay. And Joab, let's see, 15? Okay. Wherefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against Amaziah, and he sent unto him a prophet. I don't know if this is the same prophet or not, but he sent him as the man of God that it talked about earlier. He sent him a prophet, which said unto him, Why hast thou sought after the gods of the people, which could not deliver their own people out of thine hand? I mean, that's not even the right question. Like, I think the right question would be like, why would you go to any gods other than Jehovah God? But he says, like, why would you even want to go to those gods? Those gods didn't deliver them from this war. God delivered them into your hands, so why would you want to worship their gods instead of the God that delivered you? You see what I'm saying? That does make sense, but that's not even the right question. The right question is, why would you even forsake God to begin with and go after these other gods? But anyway, and it came to pass and he talked with him, that the king said unto him, Art thou made of the king's counsel? Forbear. Why shouldest thou be smitten? Then the prophet forbare and said, I know that God hath determined to destroy thee, because thou hast done this, and hast not hearkened unto my counsel. Okay, so he, this time he doesn't listen to the prophet. In fact, he says, hey, what makes you think that you're the king's counselor telling me what to do? He said, why don't you just quit before I smite you, before I hit you, basically? Why should you be smitten? So this guy has just gone pretty bad, and yet the Bible still called him a good king. It's pretty strange. He says he did that was right. Not perfectly like David, but he did what was right in many ways. But now I'm looking at this trying to figure out what it is that he did right. Okay, let's go on. So he didn't take away the high places. He executed those who conspired against his father. That was okay. In fact, he didn't kill their children, which was according to the Bible, so that was okay. Number 3, he attempted to team up with these mercenaries. Now, he did listen to the man of God on this one, but, he seems to have a heart and an attitude that wasn't necessarily right. But then he takes back from Edom after he smites them, or wins the war, he brings back their gods and worships them, and then this prophet addresses him and rebukes him for it, and he's bitter about it, and he tells him basically to shut up. So things not going so well so far. And this prophet just said, hey, you're going to be destroyed for this because you didn't hearken. Okay, so now let's go back to 1 Kings, and we can finish this, or 2 Kings, 2 Kings 14, we can finish the story. So let's go to verse 8. Now this is a little bit long. This is pretty much the rest of the chapter, so it's going to be a little bit more reading, but follow the story here. Then Amaziah, let's see, am I right in the right place? Yeah. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoaziah, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, "Come, let us look one another in the face." Okay, so now you got both kings on both sides of of the nation, northern kingdom, southern kingdom, and Amaziah has basically been emboldened now that they conquered Edom, even though it was only because he hearkened unto the man of God, but he's not paying attention to that. And so now in his pride, he says this line, which I have to admit, I kind of like this line. He says, okay, I got to find it again. He says at the end of verse 8, he says, "Come, let us look one another in the face." I mean, it sounds like a brave guy that's like, hey, you know what? Let's not send army against army. Let's stand before each other. It's kind of like, let's take it outside. He just wants to face him like a man. And I'm still in that title, and I'm going to use that for another sermon coming up. But I actually like that line. But the problem is, it's all based in his pride. It's based in the fact that, hey, I destroyed Edom, and now we're going to come over here and I'm going to destroy you. And so actually, Jehoash of Judah comes with a pretty good comeback. I don't completely understand some of the poetry that he's talking about here, but he basically says, you're bragging a little bit too much. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so let's go back to our text here. It says, verse 9. "And Jehoash, the king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, the thistle that was in Lebanon." Now, Lebanon is known all throughout the Bible as a place that had these great cedar trees and all these just wonderful giant trees. And a thistle is just like a little nothing of a plant, okay? And it's not desirable or anything like that. He said, the thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, "Give thy daughter to my son to wife." And there passed by a wild beast that was in Lebanon, and trode down the thistle. Now, I don't know exactly what all the picture is that he's saying. Maybe I'm missing something, but I think it's pretty funny. He's like, hey, you're just like a little thistle approaching the cedars of Lebanon. and a wild beast is going to come trample you. Like, I don't even have to do it. Like somebody else is going to come step on you. And so you got king against king, like maybe a test of vibrato here. The guys standing up and trying to assert their authority, alpha males or whatever. But the thing is, the man of God told him, you're going to be destroyed for this because you didn't listen to me. And now he's like, hey, shut up. And then he's like, I'm going to go take Jehoash. And he gets lifted up in pride, no doubt. And so let's keep reading. Verse 10. "Thou hast indeed smitten Edom, and thine heart hath lifted thee up. Glory of this, and tarry at home." He's like, just stay where you are. "For why shouldest thou meddle to thy hurt, that thou shouldest fall, even thou and Judah with thee?" But Amaziah would not hear. Therefore Jehoash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, looked one another in the face at Bethshemesh, which belongeth to Judah. And Judah was put to the worst before Israel, and they fled every man to their tents. And Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, the sons of Jehoash, and the sons of Ahaziah, Jehoash, the sons of Ahaziah, at Bethshemesh, and came to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim unto the corner gate, 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and the silver and all the vessels that were found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasures of the king's house, and hostages, and returned to Samaria. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoash, which he did, and his might, and how he fought with Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Israel? And Jehoash slept with his father, and was buried in Samaria with the king of Israel, and Jeroboam his son reigned in his stead. So now, next lesson, we'll have to go back to this side now. We're going to talk about his sons. Okay, but Amaziah ends up, he's still alive, but he's going to kind of be in captivity. And I'm trying to remember how Uzziah plays in this. I guess you'll have to stay tuned to find out. But this is going to be a turning point. This is like an important part in Israel's history, or Judah's history, I should say. And from this point, some kind of key elements take place as far as prophecy and all that. All right, but that's Amaziah. Now, it's not really the type of message where I can give a conclusion. It's not have a lot of great points, but I can say this. What did he really do that was good? You know what I mean? Like, okay, he spared the children, and he did listen to the prophet the first time, but at the end it ended up being really bad. And so, isn't it interesting how sometimes, like last lesson, we had a guy who was supposedly a bad king, but he did some pretty good things, and he went and he listened to Elisha. He was like a friend to Elisha, and he sought the Lord on some matters, and yet the Bible says he was a bad king. And then here we got a king that has said that he's a good king that did right, but we're looking at all these wicked things he said. And I don't even have a good answer to this question, okay? But this is the case with a lot of kings. A lot of times God sees the heart. You and I, we don't understand. We don't understand what these kings were doing. Like, they did some stupid things, some really bad things, to the point of even going after other gods. You know, if we had a king today, or a president or whatever, who claimed to be a Christian, but all of a sudden he starts worshiping, Allah or something like that. I mean, maybe this is a bad comparison, but wouldn't you say, hey, this guy was a fraud from the beginning and he's not a godly man whatsoever? Isn't it strange that, hey, we don't really know what God's doing, and some people are working as his servants and doing things according to his purposes that we just don't understand. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Here's all we know. God's the good guy. Okay, just stay on God's side and follow his plan and try to do righteous and listen to the men of God and try to answer the call, because, God's the one who sees the heart. We can't see the heart. We can only leave it up to God I wish I could remember where it is, but in Acts, I know that, when the guys are preaching and they keep getting told, hey, don't come here, and they say, we got to obey God rather than man, they would have put them to death. But, they take counsel and all this. And I think, isn't it Gamaliel who says, he says, you know what, if this be of God, just let them be. If it's of God, who are we to stop it? He said, but if it's not of God, let God deal with it. God's going to take care of them. And sometimes we have to have that attitude. Now, there's definitely a time to stand up against false prophets and stuff like that are teaching a wrong message, just like these men of God stood up against kings. But at the same time, you and I, we just have to leave things in God's hands and say, if it's of God, he'll take, then it's going to come to pass. And I don't want to stand against God. But if it's not of God, if God's against this, hey, he's going to take care of it, so we don't have to worry so much. All right, done a little early. Wasn't a whole lot to talk about there, but let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we thank you for your word, and I thank you for the examples we have, just true records of history, things that really happened. We believe that, but at the same time, there are things that we can apply to our own lives, and we can learn lessons and just even see how history repeats itself, and bad choices often just follow bad choices. And I pray that you help us learn that lesson and help us to just obey the people that you send in our life to warn us and to admonish us, and help us not get distracted with the things of the world and lifted up with pride as we think that we won a battle here and there. But I pray, Lord, that you just help us be humble and stay focused on serving you and doing what's right in your eyes. And I pray that, in the end, I know you'll make all that, you'll get everything squared away. And so we trust that and we live and walk by faith in Jesus' name. Amen.